Hey everybody, welcome back to Quali-Tea time. I'm Bulbasaur. Because why not? I think I haven't worn this hat, I think, at least on camera since I got it, so why not enjoy my literal actually a Bulbasaur hat, which is slightly disturbing in its own context, but oh well. So, into the news for this week. For the most part, we don't actually have any news, which is it's good news in and of itself, I guess. Things are looking up in some ways and down in other ways, but that gets me to my next subject, which is that Safe Space Protocol is currently in effect and will be continuing for probably the entirety of November and a little bit into December, although December will be taken over slightly more by Christmas Protocol. And what that means is that I'm going to avoid talking about politics as long as I can, and I will be trying to ensure that politics stays out of comment discussions as well as out of live stream chats, and this is because a lot of bad stuff is going down and people very reasonably are in need of a space that they can go to that doesn't actually talk about it, that is just welcoming and friendly, and I am very happy to provide that service. So consequently, safe space protocol, no politics. But, speaking of things going on and safe spaces, Desert Bus 10 is now running. That's Desert Bus for Hope at desertbus.org, and that is a charity marathon that goes on for basically a week, playing in shifts the worst game ever made. And they routinely make more money every single year, but currently, because I have them on a screen that I've dug out of storage here, a USB screen, they have raised $317,111 in 96.5 hours. They will go as long as people donate, but they're currently sitting at 147. So that is pretty much a week of my life every year, but it is definitely a worthy cause. The donations to Desert Bus all go to Child's Play charity, who donate video games and various toys to children's hospitals around the world, and they've very recently also started advising hospitals on what the best kind of toys would be to give to those, to certain patients based on what they're dealing with. So they're doing a lot of great work. It's a very reputable charity. It's set up by the guys from Penny Arcade. Believe it or not, webcomics can get to charity. And I heartily endorse them, so feel free to head over desertbus.org as long as the marathon is still running. On to the schedule, though. On Thursday night, we have another installment of Midnight Souls, so assuming the servers are actually playing nice this week, we'll actually get to go and see the Farron's Undead Legion, and also dive a bit more into the archives. On Friday, we see an episode of Edgington where we start to look back a little bit on just how far we've come and what we've lost. On Saturday, it's an episode of Spring Realms where we check out the dungeon layout and talk a little bit about environmental storytelling. We also have Dungeons & Dragon Hat's Anima at 9 PM GMT over at twitch.tv/dragonhat. On Sunday, it's XCOM 2 as we very nearly approach the end of the game. On Tuesday, we have an episode of Mating Do where we're going on a long trip. This might end up being the last 3 episodes combined just due to scheduling complaints and issues, but nonetheless. We also have an episode of York Dwarves Live number 65 at 9 PM GMT over at twitch.tv/lyinginbedmon, so we'll be doing a bunch more work on happiness. And lastly, on Wednesday, we have another episode of Edgington where, instead of looking backwards, we're looking at what the future might entail. And into the questions. So, as per usual, these questions are drawn from the comments section of the preceding video, so with that in mind, if you have any questions for me next week, drop them down below. Our first question of the day comes from Forbidden Smile and sort of leads into the next question as well. How many dungeons are you aiming for on Spring Realms? There are 12 tiers to the map, there are 12 dungeons planned, and there are 12 home islands already set up. So that means that I will be releasing a dungeon a month, is the hope, for about a year. So 12 dungeons is the answer there. Sid Striker asks, will any of the Spring Realms dungeons be inhabitable? Now, Sid previously has wondered about whether they could actually take root inside of the Corrupted Fortress, which was about as easy as it sounds. As for whether any dungeon will actually eventually be inhabitable, I don't have a whole great deal of the dungeons written down in terms of what they entail, what you can do with them, what they provide, that kind of thing. It's very much Spring Realms is very much an exercise in developing dungeons in a relatively speedy turnaround process, but there are definitely resources in different different dungeons. The next dungeon, for example, Erinus's, has a ring of trees around it, so you could argue you could live there for a fair bit. But as for whether they'll be intentionally inhabitable, I'm not going to say no, but it seems heavily unlikely on the basis that these places are intentionally inhospitable. Bo Nicholas Mattiasson asks, can you explain how to use the green screen you use? I have, firstly, two little lighting stands, more or less, and across that is a pole on looped, which is my green screen, which is just straight green fabric for the most part. It's not very thick, it's not very heavy duty, it's just green fabric, basically. And that just drapes down behind me. Now, the real problem with doing a good green screen effect is the lighting, because you need to have a clear distinction between the lighting on your actor, namely me, and the lighting on your green screen, and you need to very specifically have very clear and gentle lighting upon your green screen so you get a fairly decent and consistent colour from it. So, to that end, I have two of these big lights, which are one of my more recent acquisitions, and they're very bright, but they also provide very soft light, which is what you want because you want to provide even light. So I've got two of those that point at the green screen, usually at a bit of an angle, so don't just spotlight, because this is not a very large room. Ideally, you would have about another meter of space here between me and that light, but we do with what we have. And then I've got two smaller lights, one of whom you'll recognize from a while ago, which are providing a more softer golden light, and they're also diffused, so they are not blinding me, and they're also not providing the harsh shadows that we still sort of occasionally get as a consequence of the ceiling lights, but not quite now, because I've got half of them dead. So that is how you use a green screen. After that, you can use more or less any video editing program has some degree of green screen built into it these days, as do a number of streaming softwares, so that part at least is straightforward. Lastly, Scott Davis asks, can you recommend how to make an assassin in Dungeons & Dragons 3.5? Now, the assassin class is a fairly short one. It's a prestige class. You need about 8 ranks. You need to be about 5th level to go into it. And what it means is that you chiefly get some bonuses against poison, get a bit more sneak attack, get access to a few spells down the line, and you also get a death attack, which allows you to potentially paralyze or instantly kill somebody that you stab. Now, the death attack itself is not meaningfully useful at higher levels, because it's based on a fortitude save, and the vast bulk of characters that you want to die quickly are the ones that have high fortitude saves. And then the spell selection provided by the assassin prestige class isn't exactly very diverse. It's mostly about doing things covertly. It doesn't actually deal in making people more susceptible to your death attack for a large portion. It doesn't deal with making them more susceptible to your other spells or your other attacks, that kind of thing. So it's not magnificent. It does deal a fair bit in forgery. And also, it's worth noting that intelligence is the dominant stat for assassins, which would be fine if they were based on wizards. But rogues is the most likely class that you'll use to get into assassin, because all 3 of the skill requirements are class skills for rogues, and rogues don't really make big use of intelligence. They use it for their skill selection. That's about it. So it's not a high importance stat. This consequently means that you are dumping ability points and advantages into a ability that you're not actually using a great deal inside of assassin. Then there's the issue of poison, which is about half of the assassin class's point. And in the core rulebooks, at least, the highest save DC for a poison is DC 26, which is for Dragon Bile, which does do about up to between 3 and 18 points of strength damage, which is enough to really limit a fighter type on the front lines. But for comparison, Thaddeus from Dungeons & Dragon Hats has a fortitude save of plus 19. So you can see how both the death attack and the poison kind of tend to fall off at later levels, and Thaddeus is really only mid-leveled, so consequently, kind of falls apart. So it's not really worth, I would say, investing 5 levels into Assassin. What I would suggest instead is that you cross-class possibly into Sorcerer, maybe into Wizard, depending on how you want to build things together, so that you can get access to magic spells that specifically target Constitution scores. Now, there's a bunch of those that do that, but the reason you target Constitution is because it reduces the Fortitude save, thereby making it easier for you to actually affect people with poison. You can buy poison all the time. It's fine, don't worry about it. And it also makes people lose hit points. And when Constitution hits 0, they die immediately. And also, cross-classing into magical classes also allows you to have access to magic that will affect things that aren't, for example, vulnerable to poison or death attacks or the like. And you can... Admittedly, there aren't many classes that cross-class... There aren't really, much overlap between abilities used by magical classes and abilities used by rogues. But I would say probably go with Sorcerer, because at least Charisma is a fairly decent stat that you'll get a good use out of in the long run. But that's it for today. Hope you've enjoyed my brief interlude into nerdery, and I shall catch you all next time.